Hello dear students, welcome to this program. In today's program, we are going to discuss instructional system designing. After this discussion, you should be able to know the meaning of instructional system designing, know about the history of instructional system designing, to know about models of instructional system designing, and to know about various steps of instructional system designing. First of all, what is instructional design? In short, instructional design is the systematic process by which instructional materials are designed, developed, and delivered. Instructional design is defined as, quote, a systematic process that is employed to develop education and training programs in a consistent and reliable fashion, unquote. Reeser, Dempsey, 2007. Instructional design, also known as instructional system design, is the analysis of learning needs and systematic development of instruction. Instructional designers often use instructional technology as a method for developing instruction. Instructional design models typically specify a method that it follow will facilitate the transfer of knowledge, skills, and attitude to the recipient or acquirer of the instruction. Now, what is history of instructional designing or instructional system designing? During World War II, a considerable amount of training materials for the military were developed based on the principles of instruction, learning, and human behavior. Tests for assessing a learner's abilities were used to screen candidates for the training programs. After the success of military training, psychologists began to view training as a system and developed various analysis, design, and evaluation procedures. In 1946, Edgar Dale outlined a hierarchy of instructional methods organized intuitively by their concreteness. Dear students, let us see the evolution of instructional system designing chronologically. First of all, 1950s. B.F. Skinner's 1954 article, The Science of Learning and the Art of Teaching, suggested that effective instructional materials called programmed instructional materials should include small steps, frequent questions, and immediate feedback, and should allow self-pacing. In 1956, a committee led by Benjamin Bloom published an influential taxonomy with 3 domains of learning: cognitive, what one knows or thinks; psychomotor, what one does physically; and affective, what one feels or what attitudes one has. These taxonomies still influence the design of instruction. Now, in 1960s, Robert Glaser introduced criterion referenced measures in 1962. In contrast to norm referenced tests in which an individual's performance is compared to group performance, a criterion referenced test is designed to test an individual's behavior in relation to an objective standard. In 1965, Robert Gagney described 3 domains of learning outcomes: cognitive, affective, psychomotor. 5 learning outcomes: verbal information, intellectual skills, cognitive strategy, attitude, and motor skills, and 9 events of instruction in the condition of learning, which remain foundations of instructional design practices. What in 1970s? During the 1970s, the number of instructional design models greatly increased and prospered in different sectors in military, academia, and industry. Many instructional design theorists began to adopt an information processing based approach to the design of instruction. David Merrill, for instance, developed component display theory (CDT), which concentrates on the means of presenting instructional materials, presentation techniques. Now in 1980s, although interest in instructional design continued to be strong in business and the military, there was little evolution of instructional design in schools or higher education. However, educators and researchers began to consider how the personal computer could be used in a learning environment or a learning space. In 1990s, the influence of constructivist theory on instructional design became more prominent in the 1990s as a counterpoint to the more traditional cognitive learning theory. Constructivists believe that learning experiences should be authentic and produce real-world learning environments that allow the learner to construct their own knowledge. This emphasis on the learner was a significant departure away from traditional forms of instructional design. Now, 2000. Online learning became common. Technology advances permitted sophisticated simulations with authentic and realistic learning experiences. Now, developments from 2010. Academic degrees focused on integrating technology, internet, and human-computer interaction with education gained momentum with the introduction of learning design and technology (LDT) majors. Universities such as Bowling Green State University, Penn State, Purdue, San Diego State University, Stanford have established undergraduate and graduate degrees in technology-centered methods of designing and delivering education. Robert Gagney's work is widely used and cited in the design of instruction as exemplified in prominent journals in the field during the period from 1985 through 1990. Synthesizing ideas from behaviorism and cognitivism, he provided a clear template which is easy to follow for designing instructional events. Instructional designers who follow Gagney's theory will likely have tightly focused, efficient instruction. As there are certain events in Gagney's approach, these events are: according to Gagney, learning occurs in a series of learning events. Each of 9 learning events are conditions for learning which must be accomplished for better comprehension. Now, let us briefly discuss these 9 events. Number 1, gaining attention. To ensure reception of coming instruction, the teacher gives the learners a stimulus. Before the learners can start to process any new information, the instructor must gain the attention of the learners. This might entail using abrupt changes in the instruction. Second, informing learners of objectives. The teacher tells the learner what they will be able to do because of the instruction. The teacher communicates the desired outcomes to the group. Third, stimulating recall of prior learning. The teacher asks for recall of existing relevant knowledge. Then fourth, presenting the stimulus. The teacher gives emphasis to distinctive features. Fifth, providing learning guidance. The teacher helps the students in understanding semantic encoding by providing organization and relevance. Sixth, eliciting performance. The teacher asks the learners to respond, demonstrate learning. Then seventh, providing feedback. The teacher gives informative feedback on the learner's performance. Eighth, assessing performance. The teacher requires more learner performance and gives feedback to reinforce learning. Then ninth, enhancing retention and transfer. The teacher provides varied practice to generalize the capability. Gagney's main focus for instructional design was how instruction and learning could be systematically connected to the design of instruction. He emphasized the design principles and procedures that need to take place for effective teaching and learning. Now, dear students, let us discuss what is instructional system design models. Instructional systems design models are the systematic guidelines instructional designers follow in order to create a workshop, a course, a curriculum, an instructional program, a training session, or the instructional materials and products for educational programs. Instructional system designing is a process to ensure learning does not occur in a haphazard manner, but is developed using a process with specific measurable outcomes. The responsibility of the instructional designer is to create instructional experiences which ensure that the learners will achieve the goals of instruction. The first model which we are going to discuss is Analyze, Design, Develop, Implement and Evaluate model, which is also known as ADDIE model. Brief history about ADDIE development. The ADDIE model was initially developed by Florida State University to explain the processes involved in the formulation of an instructional systems development program for military inter-service training that will adequately train individuals to do a particular job and which can also be applied to any inter-service curriculum development activity. The model originally contained several steps under its 5 original phases: analyze, design, develop, implement and evaluation, and control, whose completion was expected before movement to the next phase could occur. Over the years, the steps were revised and eventually the model itself became more dynamic and interactive than its original hierarchical rendition until its most popular version appeared in the mid-80s as we understand it today. Now, let us briefly discuss the various steps of analysis, design, develop, implement and evaluation model for better comprehension. Number 1, analyze. The first phase of content development is to analyze. Analysis refers to the gathering of information about one's audience, the tasks to be completed, how the learners will view the content, and the project's overall goals. The instructional designer then classifies the information to make the content more applicable and successful. Second, design. The second phase is the design phase. In this phase, instructional designers begin to create their project. The design phase begins with writing a learning objective. Tasks are then identified and broken down to be more manageable for the designer. The final step determines the kind of activities required for the audience in order to meet the goals identified in the analysis phase. Third, development phase. The development phase represents activities that convert the blueprints created in the design phase into instructional materials, learning materials, and materials and procedures for planned activities. Then fourth, implement. After the content is developed, it is then implemented. This stage allows the instructional designer to test all materials to determine if they are functional and appropriate for the intended audience. Then fifth, evaluate. The final phase, evaluation or evaluate, ensures the materials achieved the desired goals. The evaluation phase consists of two parts, formative and summative assessment. The ADDIE model is an iterative process of instructional design, which means that at each stage the designer can assess the project's elements and revise them if necessary. This process incorporates formative assessment, while the summative assessment contains tests or evaluations created for the content being implemented. This final phase is vital for the instructional design team because it provides data used to alter and enhance the design. Now, the second model, which is commonly known as rapid prototyping. Dear students, an adaptation of the ADDIE model, which is used sometimes, is a practice known as rapid prototyping. Proponents suggested that through an iterative process, the verification of the design document saves time and money by catching problems while they are still easy to fix. This approach is not novel to the design of instruction, but appears in many design-related domains including software design, architecture, transportation, planning, product development, message design, user experience design, etc. In fact, some proponents of design prototyping assert that a sophisticated understanding of a problem is incomplete without creating and evaluating some type of prototype, regardless of the analysis rigor that may have been applied upfront. Now, dear students, after prototyping model, we are having another model, that is system approach model. This well-known model of instructional designing is given by Dick and Carey. The model was originally published in 1978 by Walter Dick and Lou Carey in their book entitled The Systematic Design of Instruction. According to Dick and Carey, quote, components such as the instructor, learners, materials, instructional activities, delivery system, and learning and performance environments interact with each other and work together to bring about the desired student learning outcomes, unquote. The components of the systems approach model, also known as the Dick and Carey model, are: number 1, identify instructional goals. A goal statement describes a skill, knowledge, or attitude that a learner will be expected to acquire. Second, conduct instructional analysis. Identify what a learner must recall and identify what learner must be able to do to perform particular task. Then third, analyze learners and contexts. Identify general characteristics of the target audience, including prior skills, prior experience, and basic demographics. Identify characteristics directly related to the skill to be taught and perform analysis of the performance and learning settings. Then write performance objectives. Objectives consists of a description of the behavior, the condition and criteria. The components of an objective that describes the criteria will be used to judge the learner's performance. Then develop assessment instruments. Purpose of entry behavior testing, purpose of pre-testing, purpose of post-testing, purpose of pre-active items or pre-active problems. Then develop instructional strategy. Pre-instructional activities, content, presentation, learners' participation, assessment. Then develop and select instructional materials. Then design and conduct formative evaluation of the instruction. Designers try to identify areas of the instructional materials that need improvement. Then revise instruction. To identify poor test items and to identify poor instruction. Then design and conduct summative evaluation. Dear students, now let us discuss steps for better instructional design. Staying on top of rapidly changing business and technical environments is a challenge. To accomplish this, education or training in some form is necessary in every field, very often and usually on very short notice. Creating instructional materials under these circumstances can be a daunting task, to say the least, but it is possible to do so by applying some basic instructional design principles. 6 steps for better instructional design are worth mention here. Number 1, begin at the end. Begin by pinpointing as precisely as possible what is that the learner will know and be able to do when the instruction is completed. This is often the hardest part in the instructional design cycle, but is the foundation upon which the rest of the process is dependent. Avoid soft goals that are imprecise and include vague verbs such as will understand. Classify your instructional objectives according to the 3 learning domains: cognitive, affective and psychomotor, and try to create goals for demonstrable skills and behaviors. Number 2, know your audience. This principle is just as important in instructional design as it is in public speaking, especially in a distributed learning situation. You may not have as much information about your learners as you would like, but you should be able to ascertain some essential facts such as approximate literacy levels, prior knowledge of the instructional content, level of comfort with the instructional technology, and degrees of motivation. 3rd, develop a game plan. Develop instructional strategies based on your analysis of both the learners and the course content. This can be a fairly lengthy step in the process because it is so open-ended and diverse. Very different strategies would be used to teach a psychomotor skill such as golf, for instance, as opposed to the effective behaviors that might be required to train customer service representatives. 4th, find or create the instructional materials. The strategies you identified in the previous step will guide the process of finding or creating your instructional materials. You may find that course content already exists that would work with just a little tweaking, or you may need a start from scratch. Sometimes it is necessary to reinvent the wheel if the existing wheel does not do what is needed. Then fifth step, evaluate your learners. Assessing learning in the artificial environment of an instructional space can be tricky. Unless the instruction covers procedural knowledge only, you may not be able to create a highly accurate assessment tool. Unless the group is small or the budget unlimited, demonstrations of learned skills are probably not feasible. Written tests can be made more accurate by including several types of assessment instruments: multiple choice, short answer, matching, ordering, and problem solving. These types of questions can be answered to elicit and evaluate how much has been learned. Then last step, that is evaluate your instruction. Once the instructional material has been used the first time, look at it as objectively as possible. What worked and what did not. Ask about all aspects of instruction, the mode of delivery and the setting of the instruction as well as the content. Ask your learners for feedback and keep the questions as open-ended as possible. Feedback forms that rely on yes or no responses are worth very little. Following up on performance after the instruction will produce valuable information but takes time. Surveys that measure the learner's perception of the value of the instruction can be given at set periods after the instruction. Learning is an ongoing process and sometimes the value of the instruction is not immediately apparent. For any problem that man has ever encountered, at least part of the solution involves education or training in some form. Fortunately, there are tremendous resources available for this important task. Instructing is a privilege and a responsibility and critical to the continued survival of the human race. A famous British author, H.G. Wells, put it very well indeed when he said, quote, "Human history becomes more and more a race between education and catastrophe," unquote. With this, students, we conclude our today's topic. Hope you have enjoyed and understood it well. See you soon. Thank you.